Hi, my name's Andy Payne. I'm here at the Harvard iLab. Tonight we're going to have a session on customer acquisition for startups, and we're going to do a tour through a variety of different customer acquisition techniques. We're going to talk about math and how to measure the effectiveness of your marketing, and we're going to talk about how to apply minimum viable product and lean startup techniques to your marketing and customer acquisition programs. I hope you enjoy the video. So in terms of kind of what we'll go through here, we're going to talk about customer acquisition for startups. I am most certainly not going to speak for 2 hours straight. So I've got a couple of slides here that I'll use to kind of frame the discussion. I'd love to keep it interactive. If someone has a burning question, stop me. And I figure what we might do is maybe sort of an hour and 15 minutes in kind of the session piece of it. And then I will stay around till 8 or later. Folks will still hear if there's some piece of this that tweaks some interest and somebody wants to have a deeper discussion or a smaller group wants to stay. I'd be glad to do that. So as Jody said, my name is Andy Payne. It's my email address on my blog. And from time to time, I write blog articles. And so if you go look at my blog, you could probably increase or double my readership or triple it with this group. So I figured I'd dive in. Jody has given me, see if I can make the fancy stuff work here. I assume, can everybody hear me? Testing. So Jody's touched on some of this. And as I was putting these logos together, I realized how old I was. Worked at Digital in the late 80s and early 90s. My background is technical. I co-founded Open Market. The other way I found out how old I was is I was going and looking at logos and finding out as you go back in time, they get more and more low resolution, right? Pixels are... So Open Market was one of the first e-commerce companies. We built the first secure transaction system for purchasing things online. I'm the inventor on the infamous shopping cart patent and the Open Market patent portfolio, which is a source of never-ending entertainment from the patent system. I went on after Open Market to found and I ran Revenio, which was a next-generation e-marketing software company. We built systems for sort of very sophisticated, what we called longitudinal marketing programs, where you might have a systematic way of interacting with and touching customers over time. It was a company that was probably 7 to 10 years ahead of its time. If you know some of the contemporary companies, Marketo, Eloqua, and even HubSpot to some extent, they've embodied a lot of the vision we started out there. And then most recently, I co-founded FanSnap as a hatch project out of the venture firm General Catalyst. And FanSnap it was acquired, so it was in a company sense, is in a website sense, a search engine for event tickets. So you want Lady Gaga, you want Red Sox tickets, you want Kenny Chesney. As the kid from West Virginia, I was the one that always used the country music artist examples in all of our strategy sessions. FanSnap is your website for that. So if you think kayak.com for event tickets, that's FanSnap. So since I think never wanted to have much of a career plan. So this is an explanation in retrospect, but probably starting about sort of 5 or 6 years ago, after I got FanSnap started, I switched to more of a portfolio model as an entrepreneur. So this is my fledgling portfolio companies. These are all companies I have some sort of equity relationship with, either as an advisor, an investor, or a board member. I was on the board of HubSpot. I was their first outside director and left that board in July as we're tooling it over for a public offering and getting people that know Sarbox and all that sort of stuff. I'm also a limited partner and investor in 3 local venture funds, and then sort of indirectly through them have a lot of other companies that I'm involved with. So my day-to-day is actually a lot like a venture capitalist. So I tell my friends it's a venture capitalist job without the Monday partner meeting, without pesky limited partners, and a very, very tough one-woman investment committee. Why are we writing this check when we could get a new minivan? It brings perspective. It's actually not a bad investment test either, right? I mean, my wife is, she's not technical at all, but she's been, by living with me, sort of immersed in technology. And if I can't explain the idea to her, why are we investing? So it's a fair test. So when Jody and I were talking about doing a session here and talking about topics, I immediately gravitated to customer acquisition. And the way I want to talk about customer acquisition tonight is sort of embodied in sort of this, which is a very common pattern in discussions I have with entrepreneurs as they are pitching their idea or whatnot, which is there's always a bundle of enthusiasm for the service, the product, the offering, the design, the technology, or whatnot. And there is rarely equivalent enthusiasm for how are you going to get the world to know about what you're doing. And it's the extreme cases, and I get sort of a steady stream of these, are people that send ideas for mobile apps. I'm going to build a mobile app and get it in the App Store. Well, you and 750,000 other mobile apps are going to do that. So entrepreneurs, I think, that have, the passion on the product is exactly well placed, but we are sort of well beyond, for most products, a time where build it and they'll just show up. You have to sort of invest equally in how you're going to think about customer acquisition. And the extreme version of this was, I have a very good friend of mine who has had a very successful sort of social gaming career. And he was going to do a new social gaming company and did do a new social gaming company. And I told him, I said, I think things have changed since you've been doing this. I'm pretty convinced that my friend Steve, you could build new games. The challenge is going to be getting customers to come in. So the extreme challenge I gave him, which he ignored me on, but that's our relationship, is I said, forget the games. Come up with clever, interesting ways to engage customers. Because if you can find a way to get to customers, I'm pretty convinced you and your team can build games for them. So that's a mindset I'm encouraging entrepreneurs to sort of think of more and more, is that customer acquisition becomes the sort of the gating to sort of success and failure. Another example of it is HubSpot. HubSpot's early product was pretty bad, but they did well and continue to do well. The product is much better now because they had the best customer acquisition, inbound marketing, inside sales team that I've ever seen. So you'll never have the perfect product, but a good product can get you farther down the field. You'll never have a perfect customer acquisition machine, but a good one can cover up, buy you time in other ways. So if there's one thing that you leave tonight from, it's enthusiasm of, okay, let me take the energy I've put over here in my company and be thoughtful about how I'm going to acquire folks. So I did not know there was such a nice spread here this evening, but the way I'm going to do this tonight is a tour through the buffet. So this is not going to be a deep presentation into the intricacies of email marketing and social media marketing and all this other stuff. It is going to be a sort of skim the trees across a bunch of different techniques. And my goal here is to sort of get you thinking systematically for your startup about which of these different techniques, which these different buckets will be applicable, because they're not going to all apply equally to all companies. There's no way I can stand up in the front of all of you and say, here is your customer acquisition strategy, because each one is different. What would help me a bit, though, is to understand a little bit about what kinds of companies and products and solutions are present. So I'll take a guess at some categories. So how many folks are doing kind of a pure software, pure website, a pure mobile app? So I see maybe 20% of the room. How many folks are doing some business that's sort of software powered or sort of software enabled? So like Uber or an Airbnb kind of business where it's like the business is that, but it's a website or a mobile app that makes it work. Okay, probably another half. Probably should have given that one first, and then that might be overlap in the diagram here. Any folks here doing consumer electronics? Ooh. Okay, a couple brave souls, probably 4 or 5. Anybody doing just like pure product? Shampoo? Women's clothing? Not shampoo, okay. What's your product?
Designer's home furnishing decoration product.
Okay, home furnishing decoration. Okay, so the stuff I'm going to go through, that helps me sort of understand things. Things I'm going to go through are going to be, and you might guess from my resume and background, sort of online-centric. So even if you don't have a software product or a website, these will still help, I think. If you're selling a product through or a service through a channel, tonight's presentation might be interesting and amusing, but I'm not going to get into sort of channel marketing and channel customer acquisition and that sort of thing. So looking at this picture is making me hungry, but so the first place I want to start is, and I'm an engineer, so first of all, you should never have an engineer standing up front talking about marketing. And my marketing license was revoked years ago. So, but the reality is marketing today is more and more and more, and customer acquisition is about math, right? So the best customer acquisition folks and the best marketers and whatnot are spending more time in Excel and less time Mad Men style writing ad copy. And there's that joke in marketing, you know, I know half of my dollars are wasted, I just don't know which half. With the internet, you can find which half, and if you're smart, stop spending the other half and use all this math to kind of optimize what you're doing. And the math for different companies is, you know, the what you measure for different kinds of companies is going to be different. So if you have a straight product company, you'll be talking like gross margins. If you have a software company, you might be talking about the ASP, average selling price. If you have a SaaS company with a subscription model, you might be talking about the monthly subscription. If you are Amazon selling the Kindle, you might be talking about how much the Kindle is sold for and how much all of the books that are sold after you buy the Kindle go for. But if I sort of take all of those different models, the two places where there's almost always sort of a common denominator that applies to everyone, which is almost always where you start and rarely where I see entrepreneurs coming in having thought about it, are along these two vectors. Vector one is the lifetime value. What is a customer worth to me over the time of the relationship? And the second one is, what's the cost per acquisition? How much is it going to cost me to get that relationship started? So for a physical product thing, the lifetime value might be just the margin, but it actually might be more nuanced than that. So one of the companies I've spent some time with here in Boston, it's actually Rest Devices. They're over that way somewhere. They have a really cool idea for a onesie that an infant wears that can measure respiration. And a little thing that magnets in that talks Bluetooth back to something else so that you get sort of a baby monitor on steroids. Here's my baby, I can hear, I can see, but I can also tell what the breathing is. They sell the system for that, like you would buy a baby monitor, but guess what? These onesies are washable, but they wear out, and kids outgrow them. So the total lifetime value is the system plus the sequence of onesies. So thinking about it in those terms, you know, makes the business, lets you be sort of a lot more thoughtful about the business. That's sort of the math. And then, of course, the fun part of math is when the lifetime value starts to really exceed the cost per acquisition, you've got yourself a real business. And in the HubSpot board meetings, we have four-hour board meetings. We probably would spend half of our time in the board meetings talking about this, right? And for a subscription business like HubSpot, you know, this is driven by things like churn. It's a software model, churn rate, how fast do people unsubscribe, and whatnot. But when you can sort of like make this work, your business starts to get really, really interesting. The other thing that this sort of lets you do is, and this, as we go into kind of a couple of different methods, if you know the math, you can translate between different methods. So if you know you're paying $50 or $100 to acquire a customer using method A, and somebody comes to you proposing method B, you have a initial framework to value the conversions on method B, because you know you're already paying $50. So I'm going to sprinkle a couple of resources throughout. A good resource for customer acquisition, cost per acquisition, lifetime value math is David Skock's blog. What's it called? For Entrepreneurs. David's a partner at Matrix, a venture firm here in Boston. And a lot of his companies have been software as a service companies. So all the stuff he's talking about has a little bit of that bias to it. But there's some very good, he's got organized and sort of sales marketing machine and business models. There's some very good stuff in there. It's very good resources for talking about customer acquisition. Excuse me. So to start to get into some of the details, one of the other pieces that, as I help teams think about how they're going to acquire customers, I think is really important is to have a culture and mindset of experimentation. It's sort of like, we'll try anything once. And if you've done the math and you have the analytics tools and sort of all that in place, you have a way to figure out whether experiments work or not. So somebody comes to you with a new advertising method or a new banner ad strategy or a new kind of Java plugin or a new email list. What's the smallest? This is where you can sort of apply lean startup and MVP thinking to marketing. What's the smallest thing you can do to kind of test that? And do you have the math in place to find out, to learn afterwards whether it's something you want to sort of invest more in? The other interesting thing that we're seeing, I'm seeing sort of more and more examples of in the culture of experimentation is what some are starting to call ghetto testing. So anybody heard of ghetto testing? No, okay, nobody. So the extreme version is, I think it was originally attributed to Zynga, the online gaming company. But it's the original version sort of goes something like, Zynga has a game idea for running a new hospital. You want to run a hospital, Hospitalville. This is why my marketing license was revoked years ago. I come up with stupid names. So what Zynga does is they put in one of their other games a thing that says, who wants to run a hospital? And people start clicking on it. And then when they click on it, it says, thank you for your interest. We'll get back to you. But it's the first step in, can we even get anybody interested in running a hospital? Another example is a company that I met that had done a very successful pre-sale on Kickstarter. Does everybody know Kickstarter? And they did their sort of Kickstarter sale, but then they wanted to start collecting orders after Kickstarter. And what they did is they put up the whole order form, and then just as you got to the stage where you're going to enter your credit card, they said, thank you, we'll be back in touch, we've got a back order. They did it in a way that managed customer expectations. It wasn't sketchy. But what that gave them is it gave them, as opposed to sort of a simple, give us your email address, or fully capturing the order, it gave them sort of a test of people that would have, if there had been a place to enter a credit card, probably would have entered one. So there's a bunch of interesting things, and I tell those examples to kind of get you in the mood as you're sort of thinking about, if you have a customer acquisition idea, what's the MVP of it? What's the smallest, scrappiest thing you can do with the smallest statistically meaningful set of data to see if you've got something? And then if you do, you can double down behind the math. So to dive into a couple of the techniques, this guy scares me. That's why I put him up here. So occasionally, not so much anymore, but occasionally I'll run into an entrepreneur that says we're going to get our product out and then we're going to buy a bunch of ads. And today, for most things, everybody knows what paid search is, right? So when you get the Google search results, it's the stuff at the top and the side, right? People are paying for those links. That's doing a marketing strategy centered on paid search and even banner advertising to some extent is a pretty good way to do like a self-imposed cashectomy. I can't tell you a number of times it's just been like, take your bank account and transfer it to the college fund of all the Google employees. It's a great way to spend a lot of money. It's easy to test, and you should, right? You can do small experiments, take $50, take $100, take $1,000, whatever works for your budget. But the real problem, I think, in a lot of paid search today is the people you are competing with. So I don't play poker. I have friends that play poker. They go down to Foxwoods. And when they say when you go to Foxwoods, you're going to lose because the people around the table, you do not know how good they are, and they are all better than you. And it's in most paid search categories, it's very much like that. The other people that are bidding on that page for your keywords, especially if they're broad-based keywords, are professionals. Or at least you should assume they are. They've got tools, they've got quant, they know exactly how much they want to pay. And if you're paying more than they are, you're a sucker. So something to try, but do not just assume that you can, I think for a lot of businesses, assume you're going to be able to acquire your customers with paid search. Banner ads are in a similar category. The reality of most banner ad things is the click-through rate is it's like scroll to the right to see where the decimal is. It's just 0.0. It just the click-through rates are horrible. But again, it's stuff that you can try. Is this right level of detail? If we go through like 5 or 6 other techniques like that one, is that interesting? Okay. And if folks have questions, stop me. So the second technique that you hear a lot about, and certainly was one of the founding premise at HubSpot, is this notion of sort of inbound marketing, which I put as a slash SEO, search engine optimization. Do most folks know what SEO is? So it's as I was talking earlier, when you search for a Google, I should have had a screenshot of this, but when you search for a Google search result, there's the paid stuff at the top and the side, and then there's the real search results in the middle. And what really inbound marketing is, so SEO is about managing your placement within those organic search results. But the real premise of inbound marketing is using content to make it easy to get found. So the exercise here, the sort of, take your product, the inbound marketing exercise is usually, I've got product X. I've got some product. What are the things that people that are about to buy X going to be Googling? So I spent time with a friend of a friend a couple months ago that has a business here in Boston that does the new sort of sprayed-in insulation foam. So the residential insulation standards are all going up, and you've got to achieve a level of air tightness, and he's the stuff you sort of spray in the walls that expands and completely seals it. So I was helping him think about, okay, people that want to do that, contractors and whatnot, what are they Googling for? Boston spray foam, Waltham spray foam techniques, residential spray foam. And then when you sort of translate that, what you do is you say, okay, what are the blog articles, website pages, videos that I could produce and put on my website that are going to start showing up in the search results when people are searching for those terms? And that is really the core of the inbound marketing exercise. So it's specifically take your product or service, think about the top dozen, 2 or 3 dozen things people would be Googling for, and then think about what content should exist that's going to sort of grab those folks. And I think if you do that, you've got to also be mindful of the universe you're going into. So when we were doing FanSnap with event ticketing, we looked at a lot of SEO stuff. But guess what? Trying to get on the first page of the Google search results for anything that has the word Red Sox in it, good luck, right? So you've got to sort of also, if you're going to go for this kind of strategy, you've got to sort of look at what is the pool you're swimming in of content and what it's going to be like to sort of compete in that pool. The other thing you've got to do here is you actually got to write stuff. It's not just a matter of like logging into a tool that's going to manage your clicks and manage your this and click and that and spend dollars. You got to actually like write a good article and get it on your website, and then have patience as Google sort of crawls and indexes that to get it up. So the best writing, of course, comes from from you, because you know your product and your company better than anyone else does. Some companies, as they've gotten scale, outsource it or hire out, so contract writers. So people can find and say, I need an article on X, Y, or Z, pay somebody to write it. So there's a bunch of different sort of techniques there. The tools that are useful here is Google Analytics, which is a freely available website sort of traffic analysis thing, and it will tell you where your website traffic is coming from and what content it's going to on your site. And then there are related tools called Webmaster Tools that give you the same sort of information from a different perspective. So if you're doing serious sort of inbound marketing, you eventually might get a paid tool like HubSpot, but you'd start with these basic things saying, okay, we just wrote 5 articles on termites and this and that. Are they actually starting to sort of get some traction, get some leads? Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess when you're starting off with a company, before you actually have a product that's ready to launch, how far in advance would you actually recommend starting?
So I'm a fan of Ghetto testing that's done in a way that respects the customer, right? So you don't want to sort of like say, place your order now and then just leave them completely hanging and say, sorry, I was joking. But I would be thoughtful, and it depends on what your product is, about things that you could be doing now to gather interest, build a mailing list, build a we'll get back in touch with you, that sort of thing. I would start doing it sooner rather than later because, at least as soon as you can, because some of these things take a little bit of time to gestate, right? You don't write an article, a set of 5 or 10 nice, topical articles about your area of interest and put them up on your website and have them show up in Google search results this weekend, right? It takes time for that stuff to kind of get through the system.
Is it actually okay to do it before your bank account just sells it?
Yeah, because the other thing is that Google lets you change your content, right? So if you go right now and you go Google Startup Equity, the top ranked page you'll find is a page on my website that I wrote 5 or 6 years ago about options and vesting and kind of all this other stuff. I go update it and change it, and I add links to it, and I refine it and whatnot, but it still sort of persists up there at the top. And in fact, I think for that kind of content, Google rewards you for freshening it. So that might be a case, and again, I don't know what your product is, but I'd be glad to chat more afterwards. Might be a case where you might start with getting some key pieces of the content laid down, even though you're not ready to sell the product yet. And then as you get closer to selling, you can change those pages at the bottom or add additional details or whatnot. Does that make sense? Yes?
So I'm a big fan of HubSpot and SEO. We've had some success with it. One thing that I always struggled with, and that I've really addressed a lot of HubSpot material, is if you're just starting out, you're a new company, you just create your blog, post 1, post 2, post 3, they really have 0 readers. Eventually, if you keep linking back to the same keywords, you eventually place on an SEO perspective. But what ways can you take to really jumpstart that shareable content phenomenon? You put the share on Facebook, share on LinkedIn, post to Twitter kind of shortcuts on the actual blog post, but how do you get those first 300, 400 readers to start sharing that content? As an example, I wrote Ronald Crooker's blog that we have, who shared a couple of times, but I didn't put that 100 posts, and I was the most popular guy on the text section of the blog piece.
Right.
It was all about platform. It was, the post itself was shareable, but it was about how much volume of readers
Right.
can you pump through this right away. What are some good shortcuts to get ahead of that process?
Right. So the question was, for the benefit of the audio, the question was about if you're sort of starting out from 0 miles per hour on your blog, how do you get to like 5, 10, or 15 miles an hour when you have 0 readers? So I'll answer that in 2 ways. One is I'll say some of the things we're going to talk about answer that in kind of the part going forward. But I think the initial, in that sort of very beginning, getting that seed crystal going, a lot of it is basic stuff like friends and family and legwork and mailing things out to people that might be interested and other bloggers and whatnot. We had in the very, very early days of HubSpot, I think we actually had to add a column to the customer list. This is like the very early days. And the column said FOB, and that meant friend of Brian Halligan, the CEO. So a lot of it's just that sort of hard legwork of getting, write your blog post, write your article, write your web page, and then who are 50 people that you can write a personalized contextual email to that might get their attention. 48 of them are going to ignore you, but 2 will pay attention. And then the second part, as I said, we'll touch on some of the other things as we go through. Any questions about inbound marketing SEO before we go on? So 2, I'm feeling a little old putting book suggestions in an internet customer acquisition presentation, but if you do like books and you like that format, these are 2 I recommend. The inbound marketing book was written by the guys at HubSpot. The New Rules of Marketing and PR is written by David Meerman Scott, who, and these books I think are in some ways the same style of what I'm talking about today, which is they go through like a whole series of different techniques. But it's a good, what I find them sort of good for is sort of, should we be thinking about, how should we think about blogging? How should we be thinking about social? How should we think about Twitter? It forces you to, if you go through it, it forces you to think about the applicability of each method and technique to your particular business. So going on to social media. Social media, of course, is the hot one right now. I'd say sort of a couple of things about social media, because this is social media marketing is probably a session in the evening unto itself. And Jody's not paying attention, because if she were, she would say, oh, that would be great, we should do that. But which is fine. First I'd start is, I think when people talk about social media, they're really saying two things. They're saying Twitter and Facebook. Those are the only two platforms today that matter. It's like Google to Bing, right? Bing is there, but you know, it doesn't matter right now in terms of your investment. Sorry, Microsoft. So the one thing occasionally things come up like Pinterest that might be worth paying attention to. The broad thing I'd say though is that the social marketing is so dependent on what your product is. Your strategy for acquiring customers through social media for a company that has one type of product is going to be completely different for another. So it's very hard to make sort of like a general statement about that. And I tell two stories. One is we did do some interesting stuff at FanSnap with social media, because for those of you that ever bought an event ticket, has anybody ever bought one Lady Gaga ticket or one Red Sox ticket? No, you always buy and like go as a group. So it's like a perfect example of how can you use social media if you're in the ticketing business to have, Bob learn that Jane just bought tickets to the Lady Gaga concert and he might be interested in going as well, and that whole thing. The other extreme, this isn't quite a social media example, but it's a story I think it'll kind of help you understand, is I was on the subway a couple of months ago, and everybody knows what QR codes are, right? The little codes you scan that take you to something. And there was a Subway print ad that said, this might have been in New York, it said, got bed bugs, scan here, and we've got like Department of Health information. Now, who is going to stand up on a subway in full view of everybody else in the car? I almost was going to, just because I'm me and I do stupid stuff like that, and scan a QR code like that. There are a lot of products that are private, right? Remember the dust up that Facebook had years ago when they started giving out too much information? This was pretty early on about sort of purchases and whatnot, and people were freaking out, like, I don't want to see what other people buy. So really, things can vary a lot on sort of how you think about social media. One piece, though, sorry, I keep whatever I'm doing that's making the audio go loud. One thing, though, that I think is starting to happen, though, is the social media piece in particular is making marketing and customer acquisition more and more of a real-time, continuous operation. And this is not a marketing operations center, but in my head it is, and I think this is what we're moving more and more toward. So, I don't know if you saw, everybody hear the little Applebee's PR disaster last month? It was on Reddit. So everybody knows Applebee's, right, the restaurant? So patron came into Applebee's, and she was with Party of Six. Applebee's added the gratuity. She was a priest, and she wrote on it. She scribbled off the gratuity and said, "I'm not going to get this right, so don't be mad at me." Because said something to the effect of, "I give God 10%. Why should you get 18%?" A waitress took a picture of that, posted it on Reddit, and as you might imagine, that thing went crazy viral. The signature was in it and was readable, so the Reddit detectives figured out who the priest was, who her church was. She was embarrassed, called the Applebee's, demanded everybody be fired. They fired the waitress that posted the receipt under the policy of, you violated our guest privacy, that's against our policy. And like everything on the internet, the sides line up, right? However you feel about this matter. You could, at 2 o'clock in the morning, so then Applebee's started to do all sorts of stuff, but they posted this thing on Facebook, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't know why I was awake, I'm like looking at this thing, and the comments to this feed are just rolling in as fast as possible. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, 17,000 comments, 17.1 comments. And then some PR person at Applebee's like jumps into the middle and tries to say things to make the situation better. Of course, they make it worse. But that's an extreme example. But what's starting to happen is marketing in the social media world is becoming more and more of a real-time opportunity and problem. Right? Do you guys see the Oreo ad during the power outage in the Super Bowl? Where they say, was it like you can still dunk in the dark? They put it on together on the fly when the power went out. So I think a lot of your businesses are probably pretty far away from this. But you're going to want to start thinking about things like, if somebody tweets something that might be, somebody's looking for a product that you could be a fit for, why don't you reply to their tweet? And how do you sort of find and track those tweets? If somebody tweets something about a competitor, is an appropriate way for you to kind of respond to that. Somebody says something on Facebook or Twitter that's derogatory about your product or company. How do you identify that right away, and what should you do about it? So the days of Mad Men marketing, do your creative, get your print order in, get it in the newspaper, get it in the magazine, the decision was made 8 weeks ago, are shifting to something that looks more like this. Any questions about sort of the social stuff?
What is that? What are we seeing?
This is a network operations center. So this is a company that sort of runs a network.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's not an actual. That's why. I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that. This is what I think, if not literally, some companies are going to start doing more and more virtually. Right. So if you are an Applebee's marketing manager and it is 2 o'clock in the morning, and your Facebook feed is exploding with people, who do you call and what do you do? Right? They've got processes and mechanisms to support that, or they should. Yes?
Do you have any recommendation on tools of engagement for social media that can kind of summarize through analytics on your Twitter feed so you can kind of see the pulse of your business if somebody's posting, just so you can scale
Right.
these feeds that are coming in?
So the question's about are there tools I recommend for social media. There aren't specific tools I recommend because there are so many of them. Right? There are just so many different ones to choose from. What I would say is that I think, my experience, they fall into 2 broad categories. There's the folks trying to do sentiment analysis and tracking, like, detect when somebody says something bad about you and alert it. So they try to, what are the negative keywords and if the customer is cussing in their tweet, they're probably pissed and you should pay attention to it. And then there's other things. I think the second broad category are folks like Hootsuite, which Hoot suite, which let you do things like sort of schedule and track your tweets. So you might, some people use Hootsuite might write 10 or 15 tweets, but you don't put them up all at once. You have them sort of come out over 5 days or so, and it helps you manage that. But come see me afterwards, and we can get into some more discussion on that. Any other questions about? This thing has a mind of its own. Any other questions about social media marketing? A topic that could be yeah.
Do you sense that it's between the 20 and 34, 35 age group? If you had a senior-related product, would it be out of the realm?
That's a great point. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that Twitter and Facebook users are young and old people aren't on Twitter and Facebook. So for example, my mom is on Facebook and she loves it because that's the way she keeps up with all the pictures in the family. My dad's on Facebook. He's 78. He calls me up and says, how's the new lawnmower? I'm like, I never told you I got a new lawnmower. He was on Facebook, saw it in the corner of the picture, called me up. And so what you do when you're in rural West Virginia with a DSL line and you're 78 years old and nothing else to do. God bless my dad. But what I would say is I would definitely, for whatever your customer acquisition or marketing problem is, I would be mindful of the sort of the demographics. So for example, one of the things that we ran into with our sort of social marketing stuff at FanSnap was we worked with ticket brokers like Ace Ticket here in Boston and Barry's Tickets out on the West Coast. And really we're selling their ticket inventory. The disconnect we started to find as we were trying to do more stuff on Facebook is the average Facebook user was younger, kind of to your suggestion, but the kinds of tickets that the ticket brokers camped out on were the high dollar tickets. They're not making bets on the $5 bleacher tickets, they're making bets on the $2,500 Super Bowl tickets. So that was one disconnect we had to we were trying to navigate of the kind of buyer that's on Facebook is not the kind of buyer that has the price points that we have. So again, I think it's hard to generalize because the other effect I'm seeing at the low end is there's an anti-Facebook trend now happening at the lowest end of the ages, right? So teenagers and young 20-somethings have completely opted out of Facebook altogether. So I think you got to be mindful. Any other social media questions? Okay. Well, this one is auto-advanced far enough along that I think it's already probably made its point. So occasionally I will talk to folks and they say that we have a viral marketing strategy. And my favorite is a company that came to me and said, we have not only a viral marketing strategy, but we are a viral marketing company and we will guarantee that your content goes viral. I'm like, okay. Viral marketing is a tricky one. It's exciting to talk about after it's already happened to you. It's incredibly hard to plan for. But here's at least a sort of simple framework you can start to think about it. And I think about sort of viral marketing in these sort of two general tracks. The first track is the content, right? You get a video, you get a blog post, you have a picture of a cute cat, you have something that just hits that human nature and gets forwarded and kind of explodes and goes around. The tricky part there is sort of connecting that back to your business, right? So how do you produce a video? If you sell widgets, how do you make a video that will go viral and will cause people to want to buy widgets? It's tricky. It's hard. So I think this is just hard. The second kind of viral is where you have a product that has some inherent sort of viral-ish kind of aspect to it. Like Dropbox, right? I do a presentation, I want to share it with you. You're not already on Dropbox. Guess what? You're going to be on Dropbox after you click on the link where I say share the presentation. And that can either be, those can be cases where the product itself is inherently viral like Dropbox, or you can experiment with sort of viral inducements or accelerations, right? So refer a friend, get $50. Dropbox has the one where they, if you refer folks, you get the extra space. So there's a sort of incentive to have the extra storage space. Those sorts of things are perfect candidates for experimentation. So, again, if you've done the math, you know what you would pay if one of your customers referred you to another customer. Again, it's hard to generalize this, but my anecdotal experience has been the art there is navigating sort of the genuineness of it, right? You don't want, where they tend to fail is where you've got sort of existing customer A spamming his friends in hopes of getting $50 off of one of them. So there's this very fine line where you cross over and you sort of become Amway or something, a pyramid marketing thing. You take on that negative connotation. But the thing about that's all testable. You can experiment with that. And obviously, viral marketing is closely linked to social media because it's Twitter and Facebook, sometimes email, but the best ones are the public ones where your content and your stuff is getting shared. Any questions about viral marketing? Yes. So the question is, what's an average sort of conversion rate? If you put in 5 email addresses, how many people sign up? Again, and I feel like I'm a broken record. It's entirely dependent on your business and the nature of the product. I think things like, my sense is products like a Dropbox where there's genuine value to the person you're inviting, because if you sign up, you can see the PowerPoint presentation I'm trying to send you, have an extremely high sort of conversion rate, if you will, where other things where it starts to feel like, that I feel like you're, when I receive one of those emails from you, it feels like you're kind of spamming your friend network, is probably going to be very low. Any other viral marketing questions?
Has anyone ever attempted to tie a business to like the religious, send it to only people and the bars will help you type marketing?
Right, so the question is, has anybody tried to monetize all the stuff we see in our Facebook feed and emails from times of these emails that get sort of forwarded along, particularly the religious stuff? I have not seen that. But it does remind me of a feature I wish Facebook had, which is the Snopes filter. How many people know Snopes? So Snopes is a website, S-N-O-P-E-S, where it's got like sort of debunking of these chain emails and things that you get sent around. And I don't know, maybe people are going to start unfriending me, but there's so much stuff on my Facebook feed which is this viral stuff. And it was, some crazy political letter from 5 years ago or some crazy assertion. And I'm the guy that's like cutting and pasting the link out of Snopes and putting it in the comments. But what I wish Facebook had was the filter, right? It wouldn't let you post stuff unless it had been cleared the Snopes filter. These are the things I think about if I imagine myself running the world. So how are we doing? Is this a right level of detail? Okay. Email marketing. So Revenio had a big email component to it, so I know a lot about email marketing. Oh, sorry. I can't see. There's a post in the way.
So do you have any suggestion for some of the maybe vendors that come up with coupons and like some that you see on Facebook, they're like, for instance, if you have an e-commerce business, you see that they're sharing the purchase or membership. Do you know who are the providers, the vendors behind those kind of like coupons and
Right.
viral marketing activities?
So the question is, who are the vendors behind some of the coupon and viral marketing things that you see inside of your Facebook feed? So when somebody buys something and shares a coupon or whatnot. I don't know offhand. But come see me afterwards and I can get some more detail. And if I can't help you, then I can find folks that can. One thing I would say there is that sort of the Facebook app ecosystem is its own little world. And just like a lot of companies think about what's my website, what's my mobile app. The thing I would also encourage them about, it's not something that applies to every company, is what's your Facebook app, right? What should your Facebook app be? So at FanSnap, when we were talking to a lot of artists, for example, musicians and whatnot, their Facebook app should be their band schedule, right? If you go to, your favorite band and you click on the tab, you should see the schedule of where their concerts are. So what I think is also happening a little bit, this is another sort of direction to answer your question, is that some of those features are also coming in through sort of custom development. So as the companies have the resources and are developing out Facebook apps for their product, are just incorporating those sorts of things in their app. So email marketing. Email marketing is an interesting one because it's like taking the transaction process, the purchase process, the customer acquisition process or whatnot, and sort of like stretching it out, or in some ways making a softer on-ramp. So in the simple world, you say, do you want to buy my stuff? Customer says yes, and they go from having not bought to having bought in one step. And that's great if you can do it, but a lot of customers aren't ready to make that big step in one leap. So I think a lot of sort of the email marketing stuff that actually works is starting to think about a way, and I think this might get to the gentleman's question earlier when the fellow would ask me questions about what could I do now before my product launches. Email marketing is a way to start to gather a reason to get back in touch with people and a reason to engage them. What doesn't work, I don't think at all anymore, is buying email lists. There's people that still do that amazingly. The best way I think to think about email is you've got something, you're getting people to you through viral or social media or inbound marketing or whatnot. When they get to you, if you can't sell them something or sign them up for your service or whatnot is there something else that you can engage them with to get permission to contact them later? So is it an offer of information? Sign up for my newsletter of genuine value. We're not going to spam you. Is it a case where your product is not yet available? Please email me when it comes back in stock or is available. You have a future feature coming. Please email me when it's announced. But I think the exercise here when I talk to groups about email marketing is, okay, if you can get them to buy, great. If you can't, what are 2 or 3 things we can do to sort of start that engagement? You get permission, you get an opt-in, and the word you will hear, sort of read in the books and see on the websites, this sort of gap between signing up, yes, get back in touch with me, and sort of consummating the customer relationship is nurturing, lead development, and it's that sort of, okay, I've got you signed up for my weekly energy newsletter on insulation. Now that you're sort of getting that, is there a way I can get you to kind of go to the next step and buy my product or come to a seminar or go to a webinar or whatnot? What else? So a lot of it really comes down to what's the sort of regular reason for contact. Yeah.
I have a question regarding email marketing as well as wire marketing and social media. Do these things work in context of business to business if your customers are businesses?
So the question is, do these work in the context of business to business? I would generally say yes, absolutely, but relative to business to consumer in varying degrees, right? So for example, in broad terms, not knowing what the business to business is, I might guess that Facebook is probably less interesting because those are sort of personal relationships and you're maybe not making business decisions in that context. Twitter is probably a little more interesting because it's more of a sort of publicly visible sort of marketing thing. Email is often very important because many business-to-business transactions are what I call considered purchases. There's a lot of investigation and learning and education and whatnot that goes into the purchase decision, and email is a great way, announcing your webinar and sending a new white paper and whatnot to educate the customer up to the point they're ready to purchase. Viral is tricky because in a business-to-business case, what is the referral that's actually happening? Are you having like the CFO at company A suggest the product to the CFO at company B for an Omaha steak certificate? May not work, may not apply. Yes?
Is there any thought out there on what the value of getting someone's email addresses versus getting them to like you on Facebook?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so the question is there a sense out there of the sort of value of an email opt-in? You said getting email address, and I'm just being very precise. I'm saying get an opt-in to mean you get the address and permission to get back in touch, as well as what's the value of a like. What I would say is this, is the most sophisticated businesses know exactly what those are worth because they've done all the math. So they know, for example, if you have a email program that takes somebody that opts in on your website, say, after having found your content, and you have a way to nurture them and eventually convert them, you'll have all the data you need at that point based on the probabilities of conversion, the conversion rates, and the time to know how much that opt-in is worth to you. I don't know of a way to know that generally without actually starting to sort of collect the data because it's going to be wildly different for every business. Similarly, I think likes and shares on Facebook are the same way. So I think of likes and shares as a version of email marketing. So if you like my page, what you're sort of doing is opting into me putting stuff on your status feed, which is very similar to you opting in to let me send an email, right? So companies, again, the most sophisticated ones know if I can get somebody to like me, right? So I like Frank's Red Hot, so Frank's Red Hot sauce shows up in my Facebook status feed. And at some point, I'm going to click on one of those links, and I might do. Actually, Frank's isn't a great example, but it's more of a branding thing. But you can imagine another example, which has a more sort of transactional conclusion. And the sophisticated companies like email are going to know, for a person that likes, what's the probability they get through these 3 steps and purchase. And at that point, they'll be able to value the like. But I can't say. It's like saying, what should my stock price be, right? Well, you GM or you. There's no way, I don't know of any way to sort of universally say an email opt-in is worth X and a like is worth Y without knowing the business. Yes?
So while we're discussing Facebook and email at the same time, do you have any thoughts on using Facebook custom audiences?
So the question is about Facebook custom audiences. I don't have current experience with that. Sorry.
Quick question about opting in. So I think we've all signed up for sites before where they didn't ask us to opt in and we get an email. So you very clearly emphasized on the opt-in part.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that you emphasize it so hard on that opt-in?
Because if the customer gets a surprising email, they will immediately opt out, like I never signed up for this, or worse, they'll mark it as spam, and then the math PhD engine at Google will start to mark that category as spam, right? So if you don't have good opt-in hygiene, you send out an email to 10, 15,000 people, they're surprised to get that email because they didn't ever feel like they opted in. Some meaningful subset of people mark that as spam in Yahoo, Google, and whatnot. Then what starts to happen is Google starts to tip you over into, I mean, the spam stuff is not binary, but they sort of tip you over into that category. So the way I think about this, sort of the opt-in and the first email you receive, is it has to be sort of a genuine contract, right? I have to get what I thought I was going to get from you in the way I thought I was going to get it. So sometimes you'll see websites that say the opt-in up front. They say, enter your email here. We will send you one email when it comes back in stock, and we won't email you again. Right? They're very specific about what you're signing up for. And I think those are all good things to experiment with. Yes, question in the back.
Do you have any creative ways to drive opt-ins for the nurturing types of recurring emails that prospective customers
So the question is, any sort of creative ways to drive opt-ins? Again, that's a tough one, but it's sort of in that genre of, do you have any creative ideas for advertising? But you know, and I don't mean to be flip, but that's kind of what it is, right? It's that exercise of, for your business, what's the reason I can send you something later, right? You know, we have a white paper coming out, we have a webinar coming out, right? Let's say you have an idea for a webinar and you haven't made it, but it's a good idea for a webinar. Before you produce it, say, we're going to make a webinar. If you want us to send you an email when it's ready, we'll send you an email, give us your email address, we'll send you exactly one email. And then if you only get 6 people sign up for the webinar, don't make the webinar, right? So that was not your question?
No, that makes sense, but it's going to be a lot more sort of creative brainstorming around.
Right.
How to get people to sign up. I want to ask you, what are the engagement metrics for email other than opens that we could use?
So the question is, what are the engagement metrics other than opens for emails? I think the big 3 are opens and the sort of technology. So people understand that the classic approach for measuring whether an email is opened is you put a tiny little image, and all the email systems will do this. You put a tiny little image in the email. There might be some more modern ways to do this, but it's a general idea. So when people open the email, that image is loaded, and you can tell that email was open. So you can generally track opens, though there may be some I'm not super current on the open tracking technology. The second major metric is the call to action. So if your email has a call to action in it, do your users actually do it, and what percentage of them do it? And the third one is the unsubscribe, right? So if you send out 50,000 emails, some fraction of them are going to click the safe unsubscribe from Constant Contact or the stop sending me email button at the bottom. And that's a good metric because that lets you figure out if you're hitting your email list too hard, right? So if you're sending folks an email a day, you might watch your opt-out rate go through the roof. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other? Yep.
Yeah, kind of just on that same note. So this whole nurturing versus unsubscribes, right? Like, so if you're I have an e-commerce business, and so the typical email we send are here's a new product,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously it would be great to send emails about some other interesting story about some of the products, but the unsubscribes are typically 10 per email. So how do you evaluate if that's actually creating value or not?
Right. So the question is that if I can paraphrase it, how do you navigate sort of the unsubscribe? I want to send something out, but if I understand your question right, I'm worried that maybe this sort of side content and whatnot will cause more people to opt out. So there, I'd say two things. One is, and this is sort of the engineer in me, you can model the math, right? So if you send out 100,000, if you like have two scenarios, you send out 100,000, would I rather have 5,000 opt out and X convert, or would I rather have 10,000 opt out and Y convert, right? So you sort of figure out, what math sort of works better for you. The second thing, though, as I'd say, is when your list gets big enough, you don't have to send the whole thing to everyone. You can pick 1,000 or 5,000, send it out, see how it performs, and then if it looks good and you're comfortable with it, the opt-outs are comfortable and the call to action's comfortable, do it for the rest. Just remember you do it for the rest, not the first group again, right? Yes?
Do you find email marketing or social media marketing strategies less effective for the high-end kind of close to luxury segment customers?
So the question is, do you find the social media and email marketing strategies less effective for the high end? I would say in general, probably, because my general experience with the high end is those, as the dollar values go up, you can afford a personal relationship that you can't afford otherwise. So for example, one of the things we saw at FanSnap is the person that buys the $25,000 Super Bowl tickets is probably calling somebody, and the person that's selling $25,000 Super Bowl tickets is happy to take the phone call. They don't need it to be an email, right? So I'd say in general, yes, but I think there's things you can do within email to kind of nurture and keep relationships going and provide information and content. We'll do one more on email, and any other? Going once, going twice? Okay, we're almost done. So my favorite one, and this is the last one, make sure, I'm pretty certain it's the last one, is what I call non-standard methods. And it's probably not a good title for it, but it's the notion of when I look anecdotally across my portfolio companies and other startups I work with, there is a pretty strong correlation between success and having some clever, creative, unconventional, interesting way to acquire customers. So stated differently, if the company's strategy for acquiring customers is banner ads and paid clicks, tough. But if they've got some other interesting way to do it, that often starts to get interesting. So one example, I've got a couple examples, only one on a slide though, I'll talk to the rest, is a website grader for HubSpot. So HubSpot website grader was one of the first things that Dharmesh built, Dharmesh, one of the co-founders. And what it is it's you go type in your URL and your email, it looks at your website, runs a couple of basic, like how well linked are you and what's your Google ranking and do you have best practices and stuff going on it, and gives you a grade. And we all like to be graded, right? My 98, hey, you're only a 97, that sort of worked out well. And because you get the email address, you get a reason to kind of get back in touch with them, send you your website grader. I'm not sure what we do today, but you can imagine a bunch of different options. I'm going to grade your site again in a month. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Website grader is the lead gen engine for HubSpot. So that's the machine, free, shared. People like to share their grade. Hey, I ran my website. I got an 80. What did you get? But it's most of the leads that the inside sales team at HubSpot is calling are coming from website grader. Dharmesh went on to do some other things, a Twitter grader where it sort of grades you on your sort of Twitter connectedness, and a press release grader and whatnot. But it was a very clever way to offer sort of a free thing that people wanted to share, so it was a viral-like. It had an email opt-in, so you had an opportunity to get back in touch, but it wasn't sort of a classic marketing program. A couple other ones. One is this company, Shareaholic, that I'm an investor in. Oh, sorry.
What's the punchline on how can we use this other than grading a website?
The question is, how can you as a customer use website grader?
Yeah.
Or how can you translate that idea to you? Which is the...
So is there much more to the punchline other than we can try to use this for our business?
So I give two answers. First of all, you can certainly use website grader, and you should for your own business. The real point I'm making, though, is using Website Grader as an example of a clever, non-standard, non-marketing way to acquire customers. So, if you have, depending on what your business is there an idea like that you could do that would offer something small and free for people that they would be incented to use, that they might be inclined to share, that is also in the context of you getting back in touch? That's the real point I'm making. The second one is Shareaholic. Shareaholic is a browser plugin and WordPress plugin for making it stupid easy to share things from your browser and from your blog. It's not the biggest sharing application out there, but it's what I call statistically significant. It has enough data flowing through it. It's like Nielsen, right? Nielsen doesn't instrument every household for television. They just instrument enough to get a picture. And what Shareaholic does is they tell you what's been shared off your website, where is it getting shared to, what's the demographic profile of people sharing it. But they've done a bunch of clever things. So again, it's in the same spirit. I think you might find Shareaholic interesting, but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is they've done some very interesting things. For example, when you install the plugin in your blog, it prompts you to and suggests you install the plugin in your browser. So it sort of cross-sells. They take all of that sort of blog plugin traffic that they have and use that to try to get folks to install the browser plugin as well. And then they might actually do some clever stuff in the other direction. But it's like, if Shareaholic were sort of duking it out, trying to buy ads to install this browser plugin, they'd be done. So this is the toughest one, but I think this is the most powerful one. But it also sort of falls into this sort of weird situation where HubSpot's marketing team is the only marketing team I know of, or actually I knew, I think it's probably changed a little bit, that has developer headcount, right? I mean, because you can sort of think of Website Grader in developer terms. Okay, so if it takes you 3 months to build this, and your developer costs you X per year, how that's you can think of that identically as a marketing program. But it takes some incredible sort of foresight and discipline to think of marketing in I'm going to market by writing an application kinds of terms. So this is the toughest one to generalize, but I think in the end is the sort of most powerful one. Any questions about that? I think I'm done. So I said hour and 15 minutes. Okay. So email me, double my blog readership. Any questions? Yes.
So I mean, most of what you suggested everybody can try and do.
Yes.
How do you suggest people to figure out which one works best without spending enormous amounts of time?
So the question is how to figure out which one works best without spending enormous amounts of time. I think it is a buffet, lean startup mentality. For each thing you think about, what is the smallest thing I can do that proves something that's meaningful, right? What's the smallest ad buy you can do on Google to see if clicks work for you? What's the smallest little email opt-in thing you can try to see if anybody even signs up, right? Just build the email opt-in. You don't have to put anything after it. Just like start collecting them, right? So that's the way I think about it. It's an MVP each sort of dish in the buffet, and then if you're taking a math-oriented approach to it, you can figure out where to double down. Yes?
It's an interesting approach, but with this, especially if you're thinking about launching a business and you're doing these things to acquire customers, if you don't have anything behind it or several months pass between that initial click and you actually launching the business, do you potentially lose out on those initial set of customers?
Well, I think, so the question is if there's a delay sort of between your sort of beginning engagement, if I understood your question right, beginning engagement and actually launching, do you lose the customers? I think you absolutely will to sort of some extent. But what I'd say is, in general terms, if you sort of approach it right, you can still get sort of some meaningful customer engagement and interest and validation in that sort of middle. And the example I would hold up as, of that today is Kickstarter and pre-orders and Indiegogo and all the comparables. Who would have thought that customers would be willing to pay for something they don't get for 6 months, right? Now, that doesn't work for everybody, but it works for enough people for a given product to prove the product's viability and market demand, right? So I signed up for the Ouya console, the little $100 game console, and I think I signed up for it in November. It's not going to ship till March. So I think there's enough. What you may find is there's a core within that delay that's willing to kind of grow with you and kind of live through it. And if you can kind of use that to validate, then you can be sort of fully ready to go when you ship and go live. Does that help? Any other? We'll do two more, and then I think we'll probably switch to a smaller group. Yes.
So I've heard about audience scaling. To give you kind of an example of what we're doing, we're in online address built around the household. So we have users like brides, we have moms, and we have what we term women who make money from personal connections, and we have a handful of guys who are original. That's not really our market.
Right.
Some brides eventually become moms.
Right.
People are moms before they become brides. A lot of direct sellers, real estate agents are moms as well. We use the service. But Facebook, Twitter, all of those are really kind of one-gate communication tools. If we put something on Facebook, it communicates to all three of those audiences, even if we're only trying to target one.
Right.
Is that an issue, or should we be trying to gatekeeper around those groups, or how do you segment in a world where everything comes to one focal point?
Right, so the question is about, I think it's about sort of like how do you segment on the social media platforms like Facebook and some of the other things when you've got, subgroups, but, when you put a message up, it sort of goes to everybody. If I understand your question right, I think there's certainly, if you're doing sort of advertising and sort of some of the commercial features on Facebook, they've got sort of a ton of features just like Google for you to target. So, I would use those. And make sure you're sort of cleaving apart sort of the different groups you care about. Beyond that, if you can't control, you sort of like post one thing that goes to everybody, and you have no way of controlling that, I think you've just got to be sort of thoughtful and mindful about sticking at a general level at that point. But again, I'm giving sort of an abstract answer, and I'd be glad to chat more afterwards. Why don't we do one more? Yes?
One of the logos you had up there was care.com.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how these techniques are the same or different in the healthcare space.
Right. So the question is care.com and how these techniques the same or different in the healthcare space. So care.com is based in Waltham. It's founded by Sheila Marcello, one of the best, I think, customer acquisition people here in the Boston area. I don't think of Care as a healthcare company as much. So what Care is a way for seekers and providers of services in your home to find each other. So I need a babysitter. I need a pet sitter because we have a 3-month-old puppy now. That's a lot of work. I need care for my aging mom. I need house cleaner. That's really Care's. So they are more in a market-making business, not so much a healthcare business. So most of the things I've described here all of them are in the Care playbook, and they're doing all of them, and they're probably one of the best companies that do these things in Boston. My general experience, I'm not a healthcare guy. My general experience is that, healthcare it's the complicated market. You have insurers and the government that are paying for things, and you've got to just be mindful of where the actual decisions are being made, right? Because a lot of times the insurance companies are making decisions indirectly, and that's driving things. So why don't I'll stop there. If folks want to hang around afterwards, come up. I'll stay as long as folks want to chat, but thanks for coming out tonight.